We are back on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk 1180. In Chapter 1 of his book, Charlie says, we are all born moochers. Whether we choose to remain so determines our character and our future. All we have is to lose our independence.
Well, remember when we were born, we got a free lunch.
Yeah. And you got slapped in the face. Charlie, let me ask you a question about insensitivity. Have you been told that you're insensitive because you're, a nation of moochers? Aren't you not taking into consideration that some people might need a little bit of help for the next 99 weeks?
Yeah, in answer to your question, yes, I'm accused of being insensitive on a daily basis, but then anybody who makes this critique is going to be accused of being mean, but I kind of embrace that. But, and of course, when you call a book A Nation of Moochers, you're kind of inviting that.
Yes.
But I try to make, I'm kind of leading with my chin there. But you have to make a distinction, and I do on the very last page of the book, say, okay, we can be a compassionate society without being a society of dependence. That you can make a distinction between genuine need. You got a kid who's hungry, starving on the street. You know what? We're going to feed that kid. We're not going to let them starve. That is not the same thing as a massive expansion of the food stamp culture or the dependency culture into the middle class. It doesn't mean that we have to, buy people houses, electric cars, free cell phones, and you can multiply this almost endlessly. And I think that's one of the things that we've gotten away from is that distinction between genuine, urgent need, and I don't think it's controversial that we would deal with that on a short-term basis, and this long-term moocher culture. One of the examples that I use in the book is what happened after Hurricane Katrina, classic story. You had genuine disaster, genuine victims who needed help, but how do you explain the fact that a lot of those quote-unquote victims were still, on the public payroll, whatever, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years later, maybe even a decade later? I tell the story of a guy who's living in a hotel up in New York, and basically he's just living his dream. He doesn't want to move out. He doesn't want to go get a job because what's happened is, he had the disaster, but then he did not take the responsibility to get up and get on with his life. So that's a tipping point.
I was going to bring up New Orleans, and I'll probably be criticized for it, but is helplessness learned?
Yes, absolutely. And I talk about the learned helplessness of dependency, that after a certain point, when you tell people, you know what, we care so much about you that we're going to run your life from now on. We're not going to let you make decisions in your life. We're going to take care of your housing. We're going to take care of your transportation, your food, all of those things. Well, what happens at a certain point is people go, okay, well, then I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to worry about, making the right decisions or working hard or saving money because there's somebody else that's going to take care of me. That's a perfect example. What you had after Hurricane Katrina was that a culture that, frankly, had been pretty dependent to begin with, really, you see that learned helplessness of dependency playing out over the next 5-6 years.
Charlie, I got to tell you, I'm looking across the desk here at Clay, and it looks like somebody spit in his Post Krispies. He is. This is getting to him a little bit today.
Yeah, well, don't let him read the chapter I call I Piggy Bank.
Oh, I saw that. Yes.
Because I Piggy Bank is sort of an imaginary monologue where somebody who's pretty much like us goes through all the things that we get to pay for other people. The sacrifices we have to pay, but we get to buy others. And frankly, that's one not to read if you have any issues at all with your blood pressure.
So I think about Occupy Wall Street for a second. Do you worry about the children and the young people coming up today?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that what you saw with Occupy was this deep-seated sense of entitlement. These young people who had gone and gotten themselves degrees in French lesbian impressionism and then are shocked that they can't get a job. And so what do? They go and they protest, and they hold up signs saying, please pay my tuition. Well, where did they get the message that they were, in fact, entitled to all of these things without working for them? So, yeah, I am worried about that. I'm worried about the delay of adulthood. I'm worried about the delay of insisting that they take, responsibility for their lives. We've done a great job in this country of pumping up the self-esteem of young people without telling them, hey, that self-esteem, should be based on doing something, having some sort of a skill, as opposed to just thinking how wonderful you are and how somebody else should pay for all the things that you want.
We're having a conversation with Charlie Sykes, author of A Nation of Moochers.
Well, Charlie, they came up with a couple of ideas. One of them was to have a minimum wage of $18 an hour. I can just see
how
what
would
that would
work out for them?
What would that do to our economy?
Well, okay. I mean, one of the problems, and I actually have another book, which is called 50 Rules Kids Won't Learn in School, that deals with this a little bit more directly. One of the problems that almost every employer will tell you about young people today is that, not only do they walk in the door with that sense of entitlement, but they have a totally unrealistic attitude about what the world owes them. It comes as a surprise for them to realize that, your job is a little bit tougher than your teacher. You don't get gold stars and happy faces. You have to show up every day. You have to put in an 8-hour workday. So, but this sense of the 18-hour minimum wage. Okay, for what? What are you willing to do for that? And has anyone ever told you that the reason we set wages is because it has some relationship to the value of what you do? Unfortunately, one of the failures in our culture has been the amount of economic illiteracy. And I'm afraid that economic illiteracy feeds this moocher culture, this entitlement culture, because people don't make that connection. Yeah, where's that $18 going to come from? And am I really worth it? See, nobody wants to say, I'm sorry, kid, you are not worth $18 an hour.
Well, and they want to cap it at 90. That's the other part of that, too.
Oh,
yes.
God.
Now, I just was listening to the radio the other day, and at Georgetown University, I guess some of the girls are protesting back there because they want free contraceptives as well as in addition to their free education. Everybody thinks that they have everything coming for free, as your book points out.
Right. Yeah, I was delighted to hear that, especially because I have a son at Georgetown and pay them a lot of money. So apparently they're teaching them that in the Bill of Rights, where it said you get unlimited, no consequence sex. I guess I missed that. But again, that's part of this moocher culture, where what we do is we transform things that we want. You say, okay, I want this. Then I say, I need this. Then you transform this into a right. And it's not really a right, it's an obligation that other people buy you that. So, but we're seeing that multiplied across the board. So the new moocher culture thinks, I want to be free to do everything I want, and by that I mean it's got to be free.
Exactly. And the other thing in the educational system today is there's no such thing as winners and losers. So how are people going to survive if they get into the business community as they mature?
Well, that's another one of the lessons, which is that the educational system may abolish, the idea of winners and losers, but life has not. And if we're going to prepare young people for real life in the real world, maybe we ought to give them the reality check that they're, to be successful, you're going to have to perform, and that there are people who are going to be more successful than others. So that whole notion that there are winners and losers, and that the people who work hard, play by the rules, succeed, need to be rewarded more, is under siege by whether you want to call it, the egalitarians in society, or whether the moocher class in society. But we are at a moment now where we have to make a decision about what kind of a culture we're going to be. We're going to be a culture that still rewards and honors success, that rewards and honors the makers, or we're going to be a culture that has decided that we'd rather be takers, that we would rather create this vast social safety net in which nobody needs to worry, nobody needs to do anything, and that we can pretend that we're not going to become Greece.
Now, we've only got a couple minutes left. We're going to have you back, Charlie. And I know Clay's got a question he wants to ask you, but I want to throw something in here. We're not only talking about individuals. We're talking about businesses are doing this. The government's doing this. I mean, you have a great little segment on green mooching that I thought was fantastic, where the government is doing something that if they were in private industry, they'd be sharing cells with Bernie Madoff. I mean, it's amazing the stuff we're trying to get away with in terms of mooching as companies and as government.
No, this is. I'm glad you brought this up because I think at least half the book deals with the bailout of some of the reckless Wall Street companies, the bailout of the auto companies, the whole culture that we have of crony capitalism, the green crony capitalism being one of the latest examples, and this of course complicates things because when the average American looks around and sees big companies feeding at the trough or feeding from the stash, they understandably react by saying, "Okay, well, where's mine? Where's my bailout? If you give these money to businesses, how do you then not give it to the people on Main Street?" And it's an almost politically insoluble problem once you start down that road.
Well, in closing, yesterday the White House Chief of Staff, I think it was, or Sibilis, said that the time for private health insurance is over. It's going to be a socialized system.
Yeah, definitely. Charlie, we have to have you back.
Well, hey, anytime. Just let me know.
Okay. We'll see you again in 167 hours on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk 1180.